Welcome to UnstuckAF, a podcast here to help you do you better. There's a path that starts where you are, passes through who you are, and leads where you want to go. We're here to hear from people who've walked that path or who are walking it right now. This is Orlando Bishop, Coach Orlando, and I thank you for listening as we learn how to get unstuck, how to be unstuck, how to live unstuck. Unstuck as fuck. All right, welcome to Unstuck AF. I am so excited because today, we always say we have a special guest, but this person is barely a guest at this point. Nadine Kelly, those of you who are around We Align will recognize her from Whole Wellness Wednesdays. Those of you who were at the Align and Shine conference got to do some movement and really start thinking about taking care of our bodies during the Doctors Are In, which he did along with Dr. Tamara Thomas. And as I started to think about this season, focused on grief and some of the conversations we've had generally about community and more specifically that we'll get into today, I just really thought, Nadine, that this was a good topic for us to get into together. So I'll give you a chance to say hi again to the audience.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Orlando, for having me again.
Absolutely. It's really truly a pleasure. The podcast wouldn't exist without you. So for those who don't know that is a fact. So if you've been enjoying Unstuck AF, you can also thank Dr. Nadine for that. We want to talk later about some of the things that you're doing and the work you're doing with NPK health integration, because I think it's just incredibly important, and I've sent folks I love your way. So that I'm a believer, but I do want to get into the specific conversation we were going to have and start with the question you've heard a bunch of times at this point. How and or when did you know that dawn would be a big part of your life?
Ooh, what a big question. And I'm just flooded with emotion. Dawn was a dear friend I lost over the summer. We never met in person, but isn't that amazing in and of itself that a relationship, a meaningful connection could blossom from finding each other in an Akimbo workshop. We found each other in the podcasting workshop.
Wow. I guess I knew it was Akimbo. I'm not sure that I had kept track of the detail that it was the podcasting workshop. And so just for those who are unfamiliar, obviously now I'm quite familiar after doing several, and I'm mid-alt MBA right now, which is that's an experience. We'll talk about that some other time when we're talking about grief. No, I'm kidding. But tell folks a little bit about what it's like to go through there. And I get how a meaningful relationship, and I can think of a couple that I feel are forming for me, can happen in that space. Could you tell us a little bit about how that would come to pass?
So the podcasting workshop is something that I took myself for the very first time when it was first offered in 2018. And Seth Godin and Alex DePalma, the Alex DePalma, brilliant one she is, made this workshop happen. And it was taking anyone who was interested in finding their voices, who wanted to create something, who didn't want to wait for permission to come in. You could come in with no idea what you wanted to do. You could come in with an idea. You could come in with a formed workshop. Many experiences, many backgrounds. And if you didn't have anything, you could come in the first day, develop an idea, and come out the other side with a podcast. And after that, we're on the 11th iteration right now, the final one within the Akimbo workshops. But I started coaching around 5 or 6. I'm not really sure right now, but one of those. And I met Dawn in one of the podcasting workshops where I was coaching. Now, she ultimately didn't go through with developing the podcast, but she went through a lot of the process. And, we would interact during the platform, like within the platform, during the workshop. But then after we were done, when that workshop closed, she contacted me and said, hey, would you, I feel this connection and I would like to continue having conversations, just the two of us, and we could help each other, elevate each other with our podcast. Like I can continue working on mine and I could help you in whatever way I could as well. And what I really liked is it was generous, but it was just the experience that I knew I could have with her, because she was an entrepreneur. And so she knew what it was like to support women who wanted to create. And so that was part of our connection that we could feel both in the workshop and we cultivated afterwards.
Now, I'm really glad you touched on the part about being two women who connected, right? And I think there's sometimes those basic similarities, shared experiences can come out of that I think allow for a level of depth that just would have been different if Dawn and I had formed a relationship in the same space. Not to say any less genuine or real, but just different. I'm wondering how that did play into the conversations you had, to the connection you created, to the support you lent one another.
Now, I have a potty mouth, right?
So, I do. And I yell fuck at the end of every episode. So we're here. Let's make it happen.
I love that Dawn was so cheeky. She would call me on my bullshit. She was very irreverent about her own. She had something to say about culture, and she was very much maybe not necessarily an activist in marching per se, but very opinionated about and did something. It wasn't just pretty words. It was, I'm going to say what I don't feel is right. So we had a lot of personal conversations about difficult conversations she'd have with friends and family members she didn't agree with. I just loved her integrity. And it just, woman to woman, it really mattered. It wasn't, sometimes I've had interactions with women where we're both playing a role because we're conditioned to do so. So there's going to be some guarding, but Dawn and I didn't have to do that with one another. She was a mature woman. She's a wise woman. She had seen some stuff, had been through some stuff. She, again, I'll come back to the calling bullshit. She was a white woman who was just like not about the nonsense, not about being disingenuous and false. She's just such a real person. I could always feel like what I saw was what I got.
Now, you mentioned that last phrase, what you saw is what you got. You talked about her not being disingenuous, being real, integrity. There's an obvious theme developing. I'm wondering, both in terms of the relationship, but, well, let me put it this way, both in terms of the relationship forming and developing, and the obvious connection you had as her time here was ending. I felt that was a key component of why you held her as closely as you did. So I guess I'm wondering both why the importance of integrity sure, in the abstract, we all think integrity is important, but we all also, do a lot of things that say, do you? So, so mind your business. I'll eat burritos if I want. It doesn't make me an unhealthy person. I didn't come here for your judgment. Moving on. but yeah, I'm just wondering, where that comes from for you, how that drives the way you are in relationship, and the role it played between you and Dawn, because I felt like I got to some degree, through you, witness a pretty special and specific relationship.
So I had to learn the hard way, and it's fine. We all learn lessons we need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But my life lessons showed me that my integrity was something that I could not compromise, because it was eating me alive to do so. I'm not a person who's terribly comfortable reading between the lines or hearing what's unsaid, or being able to craft a persona in order to fit in or survive in different scenarios and feel okay with it. Now, I know you can't always necessarily, it's not appropriate to totally be, I don't want to say be yourself. That's not right. But you have different relationships. So there are different boundaries in different relationships. But I always want to still be me in those different scenarios.
Right. Sure.
I don't want to play games. I've known so many people in my life going through medicine where it's about a game. And so I just generally felt like not only was I a person of color and a woman in a particular scenario, a minority, generally speaking, then it was, so I already don't belong. And now I have to figure out how to play this. What are the rules of this game, and what I'm allowed to say or not to say, and what I'm allowed to do or not to do. And is this the right person I should be talking to about this? Or just the politicking and game playing always drove me crazy and made me more disconnected from my situations and my life. And with age, with time, I felt like I'm doing myself a disservice by putting myself in spaces like that,
right,
where being myself in an uncompromising way.
Yeah. It's interesting. You say it in an uncompromising way, and I totally follow you, and I get that. I'm wondering if, for me, uncompromising suggests a certain inflexibility. And I always think of that whole thing of like the bamboo, you know what I mean? Like it'll give, but it ain't gonna break now. It'll give, And I think sometimes there's some value to that. I wonder what you would think of maybe honest. I know authentic is a word that we've had we both heard, is overused. But yeah, is it honest, or do you think
honest?
Yeah.
It's honest. And I guess what I mean by uncompromising is I may not have been using that in exactly the way I meant. I mean it in a way where you're not losing yourself and totally giving up parts of yourself and disappearing to make the people around you feel okay and feel comfortable.
Right.
That I don't want to I don't want to compromise that.
Right.
To just the incessant people pleasing and being outside of myself. It was always my default was always, what do the people around me need? And I'll be malleable that way. Right? So I'll conform to what's required, what's needed here, who's around me. And with time, that was eating me alive, that way of being in the world.
Now, you had a lot in common with Dawn. I want to come back to that relationship specifically. You had a lot in common with Dawn, but you had a lot. I mean, you spoke about, race being one sort of, before we get too far down the list of dimensions, right? Like, okay, so race was one difference and there were other differences. How would you describe how you showed up to, how you managed to be what you just described, not give up your boundaries, give up pieces of yourself to engage someone who's different than you, and to make room for one another? Because it does seem like you made a lot of room in your lives for one another. And I know about you that you like relationships that go deep. You'd rather have, somebody who you're in 100 on the friendship scale with one person as opposed to 100 people that you're on a 1, right? So yeah, how did you come to that? And I think, because I think it plays into how the entire relationship unfolded.
So it was in conversations, right? And it was both of us had a growth mindset. And so it was coming into a situation with curiosity and not being judgmental. Like, I want to believe good in people. I want to see that. I have a hope practice. I do. So because I was able to become more myself and learn about who I allow into my life, what I want, how I want to be with people in my life, and that's myself. Because I craved it, I could also sense it because I was looking for it. So I could see it in Dawn, and I wasn't wrong. And time. This is something one of my therapists a while back told me that I'll never forget. She said, give people time, because it's super easy to be away for a week, a month, but after a while, you're not gonna, if it's not real, you're not gonna keep it up. You're not gonna be able to keep it up. So this was an ongoing relationship for years. And she just never let me down.
That's amazing.
She kept her word. She kept her promise. She made me laugh. I mean, I love to laugh. We laughed a lot. We had mutual respect for one another, and not merely because Dawn, the powerful executive woman who was so accomplished and so well spoken, and Dr. Kelly, who had accomplished these things. Yeah, that's great. But there was, if you peel that away, like, we just had respect for each other as human beings, as women who wanted to contribute with our hearts, with our souls, with our intellects, and we wanted to see real change.
So Dawn, as you know, was going to be a guest on UnstuckAF. And obviously she's not been, and you're here, and we're speaking in the past tense, so that means what it means. And I know that her passing wasn't simple, but I guess in a way I knew that there was probably some version of the story that unfolded that was coming our way based on the first interview I heard you do with her, and her talking about some of what she was going through. And I guess, in as much as you feel comfortable with, and as much as you feel like it speaks to how the relationship went and how you've dealt with it since, can you tell the audience a little bit about what Dawn was dealing with as the two of you were forming this friendship.
So she's someone who had been diagnosed with a chronic fibrosing lung syndrome, and not a common syndrome, and she'd been dealing with it for several years before I met her. And it was one of those things that she didn't let stop her from being who she wanted to be. As a matter of fact, she allowed it to enhance her. You know, she used to think she had to be this type A overachieving person, you know, pushing herself totally. But then this disease in some ways was a gift. She didn't necessarily say it that way, but the way I observed, it gifted her perspective to speak up more freely about what she thought was right, to be more generous and gentle with herself, to have more fun, to be more present. So that's, a lot of what I noticed as I traveled with Dawn during those last years of her life.
And I guess for me, the experience I've had at different times, and to the point where I have to be actually extra careful because it could communicate something that's the opposite of the truth, which is I, one, push down, and two, kind of like lock away really scary news. So like, it's not like I really forget, but I kind of forget. Like I think it's like something I developed as a kid and blah, blah, blah. But there's something around being able to be present when I have been able to be present with someone who's going through a health scare, or, you know, I think of going to see my own dad after he was diagnosed and he had a brain tumor. And there's something about being able to get past that fog piece and then be there with them, that I think brings you closer to the person, but also helps you see some things about yourself. And I'd love to hear from you, because I know we've talked about it ourselves. Just what was that with you and Dawn, and like, what was the communication like over time? What were the things you specifically did to comfort or to just accompany, right? Like maybe it's just, we just walked next to each other and, you know, I didn't deal much with the illness, but how did you show up in that time?
Well, part of it was intellectually too. There was some intellectual stuff, but there was also emotional, mental stuff as well, the way we showed up for each other, because I think it was comforting to her. Again, this is not something she necessarily said to me, but I got the sense that it was. It was comforting to her that she could tell me what was going on and she wouldn't have to over-explain. Like she just knew. She just knew, okay, you know, Nadine, I'm going through this. This is what they told me. You know, she would let me know if she was in a little bit of trouble, or if she had some test come back that was that wasn't the best news she wanted to hear. She could just talk to me like that.
Yeah.
Without it, because she knew we could go there. But then she also knew that I also cared. It wasn't just delivering news that I could understand, but also have that experience with her,
right,
in feeling scared because it wasn't the best information, or hopeful because something had, she managed to fight an infection and come back, or accept some news when, you know, ultimately she was on oxygen longer than she, you know, during the day, and that wasn't so when we first met. But it was like we could make these adjustments and we could talk about it. And then it was like, okay, well, on to the next thing. We can still have this talk. Here's something subtle. She told me one time that part of her illness was sometimes an uncontrolled cough. And she said that sometimes it would be so uncomfortable for her because people are trying to go, oh, are you okay? Drink some water, because they don't understand. But so like we'd be on a call and all she'd have to do was mute and cough and it was fine.
So
and
she
she
was
didn't
ready
have to like take care of me. She could just take care of herself.
And is there anything specific either about you generally or that you developed over time or during this relationship that allowed you to be there that way? Because I think there can be the challenge of it's hard being the person next to the person. Like, I've talked about even, and I've interviewed Daphne on the podcast before and talked about, I thought about doing, writing a show, and I still may. I'm not the sick one. Because I think there is the challenge of like, no, you're not going through that, but you're going through something as the person next to them. What did you do? How did you approach? Was there a piece to your like how you were showing up that allowed you to be present, communicate caring, right? But not have that take over to the point where you were, and that's not even the word I want, because I feel like I'm diminishing what some people go through, but that it's almost like that you were like competing for each other's care. It seems like there was a very clear, you were looking out for her. And when she was coughing, she didn't have to take care of you. And that had a value. Yeah. How did you manage that? Where's the balance point there that allowed you to care and be there, but not get so upset and so that then she felt like, uh-oh, I better not cough in front of you too much because it's going to freak you out?
So I've considered one of my superpowers is listening, being a good listener. Like I'm a really good listener.
Agreed.
And I am nurturing, and I get to do that. I get to do that. Now, of course, I have to be careful how much I nurture, because I can go overboard with it, but I get to just kind of, that's a part of me. And with a person like Dawn, I could just be myself and just kind of like pay attention to context. Like, is this the moment where I need to say something? Does she need more? Does she need less? Does she that means listening. That's listening. And so that's how, quite simply, how I held that space for her.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the listening, you knew you were going to be amongst the people who were given updates throughout the process. I guess, what was it like to find out that you were on that list? And I get the sense that it was a short, selective list. Let's just start there. What was that like for you to realize this relationship with this person who a lot of people might even snidely say you didn't really know, but obviously you knew her? What was it like to be amongst the number who needed to be informed as far as she was concerned of where things were?
What an honor. What a privilege. And what not a burden. Whatever the opposite of a burden is. Because she told me, quite frankly, during a conversation, we weren't really talking about that necessarily, but she did say that, I want you to be one of the people who knows when something is wrong. And, so I heard it and, okay. And we went back to our conversation, but she meant it. She meant it. I mean, I get, and that takes us to getting those terrible texts when she was in the hospital the last time, because she had been doing so well. She was on a lung transplant list and she was just waiting to be chosen. She was working hard. She had done a multitude of tests and changed her, or I won't say change. She wasn't eating badly before, but she modified her diet even more. She was picking up her exercise. She was so happy when, she was talking about being so close. And in July, this was supposed to happen. And then before that, she goes into the hospital with an infection. And she'd been in the hospital before, but then I'm getting updates that it's just not getting better. It's just not getting better. It's just not getting better. And then I get that final text. Orlando, how I value lack of clutter. Anywhere in my life, I can clean up. You just picture me with the broom in my hand, I'm going to clean it up. So that goes for my text threads too. I generally don't hold on to them unless very few of them, family texts and things like threads like that. But this is one I'm never going to erase because she texted me from her deathbed to say goodbye.
Wow.
And to tell me that she loved me.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You talk about health in a number of ways. It's some of the work you do in terms of MPK health integration is really helping people to integrate health, right? To really think about it, not just in terms of one dimension. It feels like there's so much of that in this relationship and this story that you and Dawn shared and share. That community piece that makes it so you get this news. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? How you express it otherwise in this relationship and in others? You get this text. What's your reaction? What do you do with that? How do you sit with that? But how can the rest of us be for others the kind of people, and not for everyone, no one can be this for everyone, right? I mean, it's labor, it's emotional labor. But how can we, for the people who we choose and or who on some level choose us, show up that way, be able to be the person who gets that text and they can know when they send it how it'll be received, like to truly be in community to that level that we can be there for one another in those absolutely sort of life marking and in this way, right, ways.
I'm a unique weirdo, Orlando. I am a Black woman who became a pathologist. Okay? Behind a microscope, solo work a lot of the time, except you do collaborate with your fellow pathologists. But I'm also a person who, because I went into that line of work, probably both things, like because I was able to go in with this idea of we don't live forever. I know that. So I'm not afraid of this subject, but then also working within that subject. No, they were not all bad outcomes. Yeah, we had plenty of benign things happen, plenty of diagnoses. But for the most part, not for the most part, sometimes we were seeing bad outcomes. We were seeing diagnosing cancers. We were diagnosing cancers that had better prognoses, that were caught early enough where treatment could help. But we were also sometimes diagnosing really terrible cancers. You just knew that the person only had so much time. And so how could a person like me sitting behind a microscope making a diagnosis like this not think about, we don't have unlimited time here in this world, and you just never know. People say that. No, but I lived it. No. You don't really know how much time you had. And this is another time, like when I say I'm weird, this ability to be this feeling person. I remember sometimes feeling upset
Mm.
when I would make a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Especially one of those last times where it was a young woman. She was young. She had small children, and we were diagnosing a horrendous form of breast cancer. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm just feeling this, right? And my colleagues are just like, this. I understand that in medicine you have to be able to compartmentalize, you have to depersonalize, you have to because you've got to be able to do your work. But that was hard. That was challenging for me. It was challenging. That aspect was challenging because yes, while I understand like the value and the limited amount of time we have here and death is a certainty, it didn't take away from feeling for a person who's experiencing this, feeling for their family members. And so with Dawn, I feel like with this frame of mind I had, and she was also a person who was very practical about it. She wasn't someone who was involved in magical thinking, like, oh, this will always be fine. No, she knew what she was dealing with. She was very educated about her process. She advocated for other people with similar chronic fibrosing lung diseases, that category of illnesses. She was very active. She and her husband were doing a lot of work to kind of help families talk about it and navigate finding out about this difficult diagnosis that was not curable. So because we both had that level of understanding and then the depth of the relationship, I felt, again, honored, privileged, and I also felt like it was such a gift. Yeah. I was trying not to, but
no, you don't have to try. It's it's sorry. It's
I mean, how many people get to how many people get to have this kind of experience? How many people like really get to have a friend like that? Someone I never physically touched, but it was that meaningful to her and to me.
And it feels to me like you each and both had to be going through your own lives in a way that allowed this to happen, right? Like, and there's the like, not everyone put into these situations comes away with some friend for life. And I guess I'm also curious because that community piece that you've introduced me to, thinking about health on that level, that's just been a new way to think for me. That's a piece of health as much as emotional health, as much as physical health. And I guess some folks are introverts, some folks have, two friends their whole life. Some people have 100 people that would swear they're the person's best friend. I mean, like, so we're all different. How are you, like, how, maybe more to the point, how can we be showing up? How can we be listening? How can we show up in an open, honest way that opens the possibility for these points of connection? Not everyone will do it the same way. I have some friends, we call each other, and pretty much the entire time either someone's insulting someone or somebody's cursing at someone. That's like the that is the subtotal of our friendship, apparently, right? But it's there, right? And so how do we, what are some of the things that we can each be doing so that we don't miss the opportunities when they present themselves?
Well, you and I are both incredible Ted Lasso fans, like ridiculous, right?
Yes.
And one of my favorite scenes is the dart scene and the be curious, not judgmental. And Be curious. Be curious when you meet a person. Be curious about how you feel around that person. Be curious, be open to, does this feel good? Does this feel transactional? Does this feel forced upon? Just trusting ourselves. Trust yourself. Trust your intuition. And I don't mean like this woo-woo thing in the sky with shaky crystals and drizzling essential oils all over your body. I mean, like, listen to your gut. Listen to your gut. Give yourself time. Community, and define what community means for you. Community can mean so many things, right? There's community, there's a community, and for me right now could be my family. Could be just community of 2. Myself with my husband. Community of 4 when we're with the kids. A bigger community when you're coming for the holidays, where it'll be more of us together. That's a community. Community when I go to my local coffee shop and the barista knows my name and we can chat with each other. I always feel welcome. That's community too. My next door neighbor, who I just love to death, Kim, she and I have our little community. We can drop into a deep conversation on a weekly basis over coffee all the time, every day, all day. But I've learned with time to trust my gut and to be more intuitive about, is this community for me? Are we giving and receiving? Are we in this together? And I mean, that's not always going to be the case, right? You don't need it to always be the case.
Right.
You don't have to. Like, I don't need to go to the grocery store and have a conversation with the cashier. I mean, that's just not
right.
It's just not something, right?
Right.
I don't need to do that with the bank teller. I don't need to do those things. But what I do know is that, so knowing like everyone in your life can't be everything as well. So that's why we do need to look for different communities and pay attention to that gut and intuition when we're looking for, I need this group of people, like the podcasters. I need 1 or 2 podcasters who are just like, we could just dive into the conversation. We're already there. We're podcasting nerds. So if I have something I want to share that's exciting about, oh my God, I just made this new song for my podcast, I know you're going to be very enthusiastic about it because you get it. Whereas Kevin, my husband, I'll go, I just made this new song for my podcast. And he's like, that's great. But you know what I mean? Like, but he doesn't really get it. You know what I mean? So it's feeling that sense of belonging. Oh, I love the way, we've been talking about this a lot in the Akimbo workshops. Feeling seen and heard. Isn't that what we want? That's a big ingredient. So I would say the main ingredient for community, whatever that is for you. Feeling seen and heard. And then you do that for the other person or people around you.
Right. Yeah.
When you don't feel that way, that's not community.
That's just a group of people.
It's a group of people.
Now, there are different levels and types of loss, and even as you talk about the podcasters, and I've had my opportunities, even you and I, this went well, this didn't go so well, or, what have you. What are some of the ways you show up in community on that level to, when someone says, okay, actually, to keep it to this conversation, Dawn ultimately didn't create a podcast. That's, most people, as they start the podcasting workshop, that's the plan. So there's a level of loss with a project. And one of the things that, Seth Godin, who you very well know, was on and talking about, how we can sort of move through and move past the projects that don't work out. And then sort of built into all this always be testing and sort of this iterating and so on is that there will just be things that don't work out. How do you show up in community, and how do you like others to show up for you in community for those losses?
It's funny you asked that question, because I was just talking to a group of fellow podcasters yesterday about this thing. It's like, how do we help people who, are not showing up, or, it doesn't seem like they're making the progress that they could be? And I said, this is something that I've really been thinking about lately, because I'm coaching another workshop right now. Who am I to assume I know somebody else's journey? So just because to me, you didn't finish with a product, that's a lot of ego for me to make assumptions and go, well, that was a failure. Because I don't know what you learned. I don't know what happened in your life. I don't know if that was just maybe a pause. Why can't we take a pause and let kind of like the seeds, like the little, I have a little plant in my bathroom. It was a really tiny clipping. I don't know, so maybe 2 or 3 inches that I took from Maddie, my eldest, your niece's apartment early summer. And I put it in a really beautiful pot, and it's in the windowsill in my bathroom. And it has grown several inches, right? But it takes time. It's a process. So how do we know that person didn't start to take a clipping, and it needs some more time beyond the workshop? Like, I don't know that. And it would be wrong for me to make those assumptions. It just would. That's the way I'm looking at it.
That's really, I like that. And I like it for a couple of reasons. One being that we allow the person to lead, right? So it's not I show up and tell you, oh, you don't have a podcast yet. Oh, you must be devastated, right? Or not even that, but whatever. What a loss, right? Like, allow you to say, oh, no, I don't really feel like it was a loss. I just spent a couple of months finding out I'm not a podcaster. And that's fine.
And there's a value in that. Absolutely. Or there have been several people in podcasting that I've noticed who it took them 2-3 workshops to go, okay, now I'm ready.
Now I got it.
And there's nothing, that's okay.
Right. Now, turning that around, how do you want people to show up for you in community? Maybe that varies. And how do you communicate, hey, community members, this is what I need?
And it varies. So I'm going to keep it to the category of, since we're talking about Dawn, meaningful, close connections, real, where I can really be myself. I mean, so that's one thing where, so with those people, here's a good example. I have one of my best friends, Jocelyn. I met her when I was 14 years old. We met on the first day in high school. We were both nerds who had done some math before we came to high school, so that we were placed in the sophomores with the sophomores. So we skipped a year with math. So both of us, so we're the only freshmen in there, so we just instantly bonded over being nerds, quite frankly, and loving music. And, we're doing this math together. And she's a person who We only see each other once a year.
Mm.
And every time we see each other, it's like those 364 days never pass. So why is that? Because there's trust. There's no artifice. We both dive deep. Last time I saw her, a few weeks ago, we were having breakfast and I was having hot flashes. And we could just both laugh, right? I didn't have to feel self-conscious about it. I could just go. I actually told her, because we both have a good sense of humor. I said, "Oh, Jocelyn, I can't promise you're not going to be treated to at least 2 or 3 more of these during our time together." So we can just do that, Whereas if I'm in a place where I don't feel as safe, or where there isn't that trust, or that sense of belonging, that sense of comfort, I know that I'm acting because I'm in a situation with that other person that really the two of us don't necessarily want to be in. Come on, we all
say more.
People who have in-laws. Now, I'm talking to you married people. Now, you cannot tell me that you love every single in-law. That is not true. I call you on your bullshit.
That's really funny.
So that could look like community, right? You get together for Thanksgiving. Oh my God, you're gonna see, the in-laws, and you're gonna see these uncles and aunts that you don't necessarily have a lot in common with, except if you were to both give blood, there'll be, you'll share some genetics, but the chemistry is not there. You don't have to like everybody. Just because you're related to them, so you're going to be put in these artificial situations. Somebody's wedding, somebody's this, somebody's that. That's not, to me, that's not community. That's, maybe to some in the room it is. Maybe for some people in there want it to be, but that doesn't have to be true for everybody. And that doesn't mean that you can't show up with your boundaries in that situation and know, okay, so maybe this is not my community necessarily, but I know that I can still maintain myself in that I'm going to have integrity. I'm going to be polite. I'm going to be kind, but I do not have to mix it up with this person. I don't have to spend time with this person just because we both had to be here.
Yes. And I say yes just because I'm hearing, and what I'm really hearing that made me sit forward, react, is that there's an amount of work, right? There's an amount of lifting. There is amount of, okay, if I'm going to be real with you, if you're going to be real with Jocelyn and say, whew, there's about to be some sweating going on over here. That's just how it's going to be. Okay. I think that's hilarious, right? That you have to trust. She has to do the work, and not that it feels like, oh, your friend, so okay, but it's still the work of making room for you in that moment, right? That's work. And it seems to me that sometimes what you're talking about, when we don't have true community but groupings, is that there's an assumption of community. There's an attempt to presume the benefits and behaviors of community.
Family, we're all family.
Yeah, without the labor that goes into but this is why I trust you. I trust you because since we've been 14, we could talk about braces and boys and who was the cutest in whatever group and what it's like to put up with your mother and whatever other 1,000 things we've talked about. So now I know fully that you can tell me if you having a hot flash, and I can tell you if I'm having a hot flash, right? And so what are some of the things we can be doing, we can be looking at in life that are the labor? You talked about listening, but with those, because that has been frankly crazy making for me at certain times. That there's this sort of built-in like, oh, but we're family. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what does that really actually mean?
Thinking.
Yeah.
That's the magical thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
and what's your reaction to that thinking? Yeah.
Well, it's like, well, that's why I've had this conversation with many a person.
Mm.
You don't get to choose those people.
Mm.
Okay? So it's not my fault that might be my cousin.
I love it's not my fault. Hey, don't look at me. That's funny.
I didn't do that.
Right.
So why should I have to do all that work and pretend and to act and to, sit here silently? Here's something that happens to me that I noticed when I'm very uncomfortable. I will start sweating around, not the hot flashes.
This is a different
beyond that. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about like, I have a physical response when I'm very uncomfortable around a person. It's like, oh, they're draining me. They're triggering me. This does not feel good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so as I'm getting older, it's like, oh, why do we have to do this? Oh, newsflash, we do not.
We don't. Yeah. 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 And I think when we realize that we don't, we make it special when we do. Right. I mean, I think, sure, we talked about, we can joke about in family and so on. And, if you had a problem with me, you probably could have brought it up before we started recording, but whatever. We'll deal with that later. We'll deal with that later. We're not going to do this. I'm not doing this with you today. No, but for real. But I think seriously, when we then say, I'll be there, right? I will show up for it. I mean, I joke around with you all the time, but like, you have called me when you're like, okay, like I'm done holding it together. What the hell? And I've called you when I'm done, when I'm just like, okay, like this is the rope. I'm at the end of it. What the hell? And I think those conversations are made special because we make the choice. Now, I will also say that when we make the choice, when we invest in a relationship with someone, and then they're gone, and I have my own spiritual beliefs and so on, and it's not a religious thing, and so I'll just say they are gone from this place. We'll just leave it there. I think we can all, whatever you believe, I think we can all agree to somebody used to be standing here and they're not standing here now, so we can leave it there. There is a true experience of loss. I mean, I wasn't even sure if I would bring this up, but earlier today got word that someone I know who's been going through cancer treatment, the doctors and together they've decided to discontinue treatment. And so things are now shifting to like a home hospice kind of a situation. And as much as I can process what a wonderful life the person has lived and what a great friendship and what a blessing that we got to spend the time we spent together and the laughs and the this and the that. I think my friend just told me they died, right? And there is that loss. And I remember with my own kids looking down into their cribs. I had just lost my mom very shortly before they were born. And I remember looking in the crib and being like, oh my God, I set you up for this. Right? There's the profound level. I mean, and there's pain, right? I mean, how do we leverage community to deal with our pain, to help others deal with their pain? And then what about the relationship and the experience makes that worth it? Because I could definitely see the equivalent of the argument of the teenager who goes, I had my heart broken. I'm not going to prom and I'll never love again. right? And we all go, oh, but there's a level on which I'm like, that's not the craziest sentiment. This
But
hurts
you're
like hell, and I
missing,
don't want to go through it again.
but you're missing out on taking those chances and taking those risks to connect with another person, which is what we're social animals. We're biologically wired for community.
Mm.
So there's a light and there's dark. Like, we've heard this before, right? Like, you don't know there's darkness unless you know there's light. And how do you know how this person is going to impact you and change you moving forward so that you can maybe have a better relationship with another person? Like, and I'm even talking about maybe not necessarily the most positive things, because I really do believe, what is it, a reason, a season,
lifetime.
Yeah, a lifetime. I used to really hate the reason people. The season people, I was also like, oh, really?
Yeah.
But
I want everybody to be a lifetime.
I want everybody to be a lifetime. But at the same time, it's like, no, you needed that reason person, so you don't do that again. Or don't let anyone do to you again, and you don't do to again. Okay, you gotta pick up the mirror. Okay, what did I do here? It was a dance. Okay, I participated. How do I not want to show up like that again?
Right.
Going forward. So in community, you get to have these dances with people, and you gotta you gotta be willing to not hold on tightly to it too. You gotta be able to kind of let it go and let it breathe. Let it be what it will without needing to know the outcome. And this is coming from a person who just loves herself some control.
Well, I'm glad you said it, sis. I am glad you said it, because I was like, this sounds an awful lot like not being in control. And I don't like it. I don't like one bit of it.
I don't like it either, but that is something that is called life.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, as a parent, Maddie has been going to Kenya. She's gone twice now. She's planning to go again.
Oh, really?
Oh, now, wow. As a parent, of course, you're just like, oh, my baby she's traveling all by herself. Okay, so, but at the same time, it's like, I have no control over that. She's an adult. This is her life. But what I have also known is, with all of that, missing her and worrying about her, is she okay? She's safe? Is she eating enough? And then she comes back, and you see this beautifully transformed being, and you get to, as a parent, something in you changes and shifts because of that, because of that letting go.
That's serious.
My kids make me a better person, 100%.
And it's and in part, it is the actual watching your heart walking around outside your body that drives that growth, isn't it? That's amazing. So, yeah, I think for a lot of people, the last couple of years have been particularly marked by death, loss, obviously COVID, to just, start there. And I'm also noticing that, as I've now hit the big 50, the celebrities who are dying are no longer, oh yeah, I remember so-and-so used to be on Hollywood Squares. Now it's like, oh my God, I had so-and-so's first album. I remember when they came out, and I remember all the lyrics, and oh my God.
Yeah.
And there is a challenge to that. I guess all the things you said about life on some level speak to the totality of life, which does include death. And I'm wondering, what you've learned about death that you do apply to community.
Be more present.
Mm.
Make the most of the moments you have. Like, cherish it. Don't rush through something or take it for granted. Savor, pay more attention, create more space for the person and yourself to be able to have an experience. You're creating memories. This made me want to do that. It's made me want to savor. It's made me want to savor the memories. It's made me want to sip the moments. And I'm not a naturally patient person. So it's a practice. It is a practice. Sometimes I'm still very much programmed to be worried about, like, oh, we're running out of time. Is it what's next? And the checklist and the to-do list, but letting that go and unlearning that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. Like, okay, I'm here. I'm watching this show with my kid or with my husband, and let's enjoy this moment. Let's really laugh and let's really be present and share and be there together.
I love
because it's not guaranteed that we'll be able to have another experience. It's just not.
Yeah. I could ask 100 more questions. But what I would really like to do is, and you see, I feel a little spoiled because you drop this kind of wisdom on me all the time. So I just get used. It's just part of my day. I'm driving from A to B. Let me call Nadine and get some of this wisdom, sort out whatever it is that's going through my mind. I guess I do though want to ask you specifically, because it was the relationship with Dawn, and it was you getting the message from her, having the process that, like, I'm gonna need to save this text thread. This is like a way I can hold on to someone who's not here with me anymore. Specifically, what do you carry on from that relationship? Because I know that it's been such a special piece, and maybe it's the presence piece, right? Maybe it's the same thing, but I'm just curious, specific to that and what you learned from that friendship. What do you carry forward?
Optimism.
Oh, wow. That is not what I expected you to say. Yeah. Optimism. Say more. Yeah.
Because it was one of her words. She walked the walk and she talked the talk, and I saw it I just saw it and experienced it in action. It's a practice. See, because maybe I surprised you because, okay, so I'm not the most optimistic person in the world, so that's why I could notice it in the person and go, ooh, I want more of that. And it's a skill. It's not a talent. It doesn't mean that you can't be that way. It means that I can stop in the moment and go, ooh, Nadine Kelly. What is all this like doom and gloom? You are being a Debbie Downer right now. It's an easy thing to do. It's in my wheelhouse. Okay, stop. Where's the good here? Where's the good here?
Where's the good here?
I just told my yoga class today, for the first time in my life, I can't wait for winter. I think winter is starting to become my favorite season. Yes, I said it. And I know you're like, what
is going on?
What is happening? Because it'll be quiet. There won't be people rushing, because we live in a place where it's during the summers and falls is pretty here. So it's becoming a little bit more touristy and well-traveled. A lot of people have moved from Chicago to here and brought that Chicago like hyped energy, and we need all this excitement and we need this to we need to transplant what a suburban house in Chicago looks like here. And it's like, no, 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 no. It wasn't like that when I first got here. I'm fine. That's fine. What? Like, let go. Things happen. We change, we adapt. But oh my God, it's the woods, and it is something that I love. It's being able to look outside and I don't see expressway, and I can actually hear some birds. I can actually feel that. It feels good to my mental and emotional well-being, a lot more than I had ever thought that it would, being in nature like this. And so winter is going to be this opportunity where it's just going to be, so there's optimism, right? It's going to be quiet. There won't be a whole bunch of, because the snow and stuff will keep people away from this area. And it'll just be about being in nature and not like forcing it to look a certain way. And yeah. So that teaches me too. That teaches me that I can change. Dawn did. She taught me that you can change. You can practice something. It's not out of your reach. You don't have to subscribe to your own story. You don't have to keep telling yourself the same tired story. If we want to, we can change it. We can adapt.
I mean, there are three pieces there, so I'm going to call them each out because I feel like they work together. That piece about not subscribing to our own story, it's an incredibly powerful piece to me, because it even in dealing with death. And like I said, the last few years, I know I'll speak for myself and go, I just feel like every time I'm like, okay, let's process this. And then something else shows up and I'm like, okay. Or we could just rip off the scab, start over. But I love that we do have an opportunity to say, like, this is going to be my relationship to this. This is how I'm going to go through this. This is how I choose to see this. Even in the moments that were most difficult, right after, Dawn was gone, I always got the sense from you that, and maybe it was the optimism of the relationship impacting you, that you were not cursing the heavens, right? Like, yes, there was sadness, but it was in the context of what you're describing and in the context of thinking about the conversations and the good of it. So you're talking about that, and then you're also talking about seeing the good, right? So the story, seeing the good so you can tell a story that serves you, and then being present so that you can see the good, so that you can tell the story that serves you. So I see those pieces actually as we've kind of walked through them, and I'm just sort of in real time right now. I mean, we didn't plan anything like that, but I see being present so that you can see the good, so that you can tell the story that serves you. And I think a lot of us could use that. Summary.
Yeah.
A lot of us could use that. Well, Nadine, as always, I'm sure this will not be your last visit, but I am glad this is the visit we are having right now. And I see plenty of good in it. And I'm pretty sure that it's going to be helpful to a lot of people to hear your story. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for giving me this platform to honor my friend and continue the journey of grieving the loss of such a beautiful person.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely welcome. And I would add that you honor friendship itself in the way you've talked about your friend and the way you've talked about friendship. So I thank you for that. Take care.
Thank you.
You know what time it is. It's time to walk the line. As the great Darryl Dawkins once said, when it's all said and done, there's nothing left to say or do. So let's just use the words Dr. Nadine gave us. Be present. See the good. Tell the story that serves you. Want to tell us a little bit of what you've done with that walking the line? Come check us out. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Where you at? That's where we'll be at. If you really want to join the conversation, come through the We Align community at wealign.alignp.com, because that's where you gonna see that you can get unstuck, and you can be unstuck, and you can live unstuck. Unstuck as fuck. And now, Grief by Dr. Nadine to play us out.